to continue sort of the conversation around big social networks and also just big internet companies, proud to introduce a gentleman who is from Google. He's actually somebody I've spent quite a lot of time with lately. So why don't we go ahead and jump right in. Help me welcome Tim Reis, Head of Social and Mobile Americas at Google. Hey, Tim. See you, sir.
Right here?
Yes, sir. We have a lot to talk about. I have a lot of questions to see if I can squeeze them all in as we're going. But you know, we have been having a lot of conversations lately, and these conversations have not necessarily been made public as to why we've been talking a lot lately. But maybe we could tease the crowd a little bit about what we're doing.
Yeah, we're very excited to be tapping into your point of view on this stuff and your expertise. We're developing a playbook for social, similar to something we did a few months ago back in the spring for mobile. Just kind of a guideline of you know, not even what are all the answers, but let's start with what are the right questions to be asking.
Right. Yeah, I think the idea, what we're doing in terms of the social playbook, is that, and we're going to get into this at a deeper level, but I really loved the approach. When we originally started talking, it was, you know, Brian, we keep getting these same questions over and over and over again. They go to, the people who are asking them, they go to conferences, they read books, and believe it or not, it's the same questions. And we looked at the mobile playbook. You had sent that along, and I just fell in love with it. It was so rich. It was such a great read, and it was not only inspiring, but it was actionable. And so it's free. If you'd like to get it, you can Google it, the mobile playbook. And I'd also highly suggest, as I was doing that research in preparing and working with you on the social playbook, that there was another book that was authored by Google called The Zero Moment of Truth. And that one, I could give you the URL. That one's zeromomentoftruth.com. It's also a free ebook, and it sort of talks about the evolving landscape of commerce and decision-making and how the web plays a role in that decision-making. So
The mobile playbook's easy to find, too. It's themobileplaybook.com.
Oh, hey, guys, themobileplaybook.com. I knew that. All right, well, let's jump right in. But before I ask you the first question, you have a little network called Google+. Certainly the numbers have been quite impressive lately. I think what has it been about a year since it launched?
About a year, yeah.
So why don't you get us up to speed real quick on the state of Google+?
Yeah, it's been a tremendous success. We're up to 400 million people who have upgraded to the Google+ experience versus a general sign-in. The pace of that comes out to about the population of San Francisco signing up every day. So that's a pretty good start. And actually, at that pace, makes us the fastest accelerating social platform in history. So we feel really good about that. We've got about 100 million monthly actives. These are people who are in the stream, not just touching, you know, the outer periphery of what we're doing. And people are spending 12 minutes a day, adds up to 6 hours monthly, within our stream, within the specific Google+ content. So we feel really good about all of that, but I'd hasten to add, that isn't even the point of the whole thing.
Right.
I mean, the real mission of what we're trying to do with Google+ is do social 3.0. You know, how do we take all that insight and energy that comes from understanding people's behaviors and what people want to share with each other and endorse to each other, and put that to work in everything that you do in the internet.
Right. Well, what do you think in terms of, I mean, those are certainly not only staggering numbers, but they're almost perfectly tweetable, like data points. The San Francisco one is quite fascinating. Well, what is it though, especially when the world is so burnt on all of the technology just coming at them from left and right? I think one of the original conversations when Google+ launched, there were two. One is, maybe this is the very thing I needed to finally abandon my Facebook. Or the opposite was, I'm not sure I can embrace another social network in my life, but you guys just took off. I mean, what do you think was behind that success?
Yeah, I think we've moved from some basic insights, and one of them Paul just referred to, which was understanding how important mobile is in the social milieu, right? People are being social out and about, so mobile's critically important. We've been very successful on mobile, and in fact, at this point, we have more people visiting Google Plus via mobile device than via desktop. So that's been a big boon for us. The other side is the way we've approached how we monetize the business. So we believe in an uncluttered environment. And so in the stream, there is no advertising. We're not placing ads against that kind of communication. We're taking the input from that, social signals, and putting it in other places where consumers are more at ease encountering advertising, and where we can serve it in contexts that social signal is empowering.
Wow. Well, I mean, certainly mobile is a recurring theme that we hear not only throughout this conference, but you can't help just to hear what kind of massive impact mobile is going to have. And I know we're going to get into this a little bit deeper, but I wonder just if we could get, especially since we're on the topic of Google Plus specifically, if you could just give us a sort of a high-level view of how you see Google Plus fitting into the Google ecosystem.
Well, that's kind of the critical component of how we're looking at the whole thing. Is we never desired to be just another social platform. The phrase that Larry Page uses is we want to create a social spine. So you start taking these recommendations and these implicit endorsements of brands and using those signals in the way you serve search. We know, for instance, when the unit is called social extensions. When a social extension serves on a search result, we know that on average we're seeing a 5 to 10% increase in click-through rate. So we've made that search ad more effective for the marketer and more helpful for the user. Mm-hmm. And those two things are related. While the standard is 5 to 10%, we've actually seen H&M, for instance, is seeing a 22% increase in click-through rate. Swarovski is seeing a 45% increase in click-through rate. And if you know anything about search click-through rates, that's an extraordinary thing to move that number.
Right, right. Well, let's jump into the playbook. I actually think it's quite fascinating that a company like Google is taking the time to author these series of books to help brands. There's no shortage of attempts to help brands, but I mean, Google stepping into this and putting a voice and a stake in the ground about here's mobile, here's zero moment of truth, and now here's social. I'd love to hear sort of why, or the inspiration behind why Google is approaching this book now.
Well, you alluded to it before, and you run into the same thing we do. You can go to a lot of conferences, you can have a lot of sales calls and meetings with clients, and you'll hear the same questions and concerns over and over again. Around organizing the company around the mission of social, around understanding the benefits of social and articulating that. What should my goals be? How should I achieve them? These kinds of things. I mean, how many of you have got questions about the performance of your social campaigns?
Oh, I believe it's more than that.
Yeah. All right, how many of you are just too lazy to lift your hand, right? So that it's a pretty universal set of asks, right, that's going on out there, and we started to see that trend and say, hey, maybe we can wade in here and start to collect a point of view that would be helpful.
Right. I mean, are you talking to varying levels of people within the brand? Are they all within one type of department? They just everywhere?
So, I'm sorry.
In terms of the roles of the people who are asking these questions.
Oh, yeah. It's very consistent because you could go all the way to the CEO, and the CEO wants to know, why do I care?
Right.
Often enough, it's the CFO who has asked that more bluntly. Everybody's trying to figure out how does social affect them and their brand and their success. And much of this conference is about this subject, about understanding not only how should the company adapt to it, but how do you articulate that value proposition?
Absolutely, and I think one of the terms that's used quite often in just interactive in general is the whole idea of 360, and having a 360 view of the company or the customer. And we're looking at, especially this afternoon, around the idea of an experience design, where, as Thomas Marzano showed, you could have this experience flow that how you can lead that experience through every one of the touch points. I don't know that I could think of a better example at the moment than Google, where you actually are a lot of these touch points throughout the dynamic customer journey these days. So how do you think through, and I know we talked a little bit about this around the concept of social spine, but how are you helping brands really see what a 360 view of the customer looks like?
Sure, we're if you take the example of what we're doing on search, and again, I'm kind of overlapping what I've said already, but we're taking these social signals to enhance the user experience and the market experience. As you look forward to what we might do on other product platforms, it's going to be that same guiding principle. How do we take social signals outside of something that's just this remote experience, a site-based experience, and put that data to use in everything you do, whether that's mobile or display advertising or video or whatever it might be. So that's kind of how we're plugging into it. We recognize that instead of social being purely a destination, it can be a part of everything that someone's doing, and that's where that 360-degree view comes in.
That's wonderful. Well, I think with the time we have left, I want to spend the rest of it on these questions. And there were 5 questions that seem to come up all the time. They're 5 really important questions. I think we'll go through them, and then at the end, we'll throw up a URL that shows where you can sign up for the book when it is released. I think 2013 is what we're looking at.
Should be early next year, yeah.
All right, so let's jump into the 5 questions that, and I think the way we phrased it too is the 5 questions that every marketer should be asking, but certainly there's no shortage of those questions being asked right now. The first question is quite to the point. How does social improve our marketing strategy? And I think one of the elements where we initially focused was these ideas of moments, these moments of truth. Mm-hmm. How have the moments that matter really changed with social?
Yeah, this idea of the moments that matter is something that's really keen in our minds. Obviously, the search business is built off of that, the moment of relevance, when someone's raising their hand saying, I want to know about fill in the blank right now. Where social taps into this is there has been a disconnect between my saying, I really like Ferragamo shoes, and my friend asking me for a recommendation for shoes. And so what we're doing here, just on the search end of the business, is trying to enhance your marketing by bringing in this signal that makes the ad more relevant, more effective. We know that about 70% of all consumers favor recommendations from peers, from real people. That may be head-slappingly obvious, but we're now taking that obvious idea and putting it to work for your marketing.
Right. And this idea, though, of recommendations, social recommendations, there are those moments that matter that was pretty easy to understand. If you search something in Google, you can massage or help or encourage what comes back and what people will then click on from there so that you can really drive the type of activity or performance that you're looking for. In the world of social, where things are based on recommendations, the idea that moments that matter almost becomes elusive a bit. But how do you help brands sort of navigate that? So we could break that down into, for example, the stages of the customer journey. So in one of the first moments that matter is awareness. Mm-hmm. So for example, how have you worked with companies around the awareness element?
We had a recent case, the Muppets, launching a new movie. They created a Hangout, and we haven't talked about Hangouts, but it's part of our platform, that multi-person video chat, and the ability to take that live chat and stream it live on YouTube and reach thousands of people. The Muppets reached 400,000 people through this Hangout on air and associated videos. They also started dropping in on other people's Hangouts. So, one of those little windows would open up, and there's Kermit the Frog is participating in your call. And they helped build awareness of this new launch by engaging the audience in a social system. It was a really creative use of the platform.
That is cool. I know that there are other stages of the journey, and maybe we'll come back to them if we have more time, but I want to make sure that we get through these questions.
Sure.
The second question, I'm going to actually ask it, not just state it. And I'm going to ask it, and I'd love for you to just start tackling it in terms of not just how we approached it in the book, but just your experience and what you're seeing. And that is, how do we build our brand with social?
Well, so this is they're very similar to the other question, but more about how do you keep building the brand. A good example is there's an apparel company that we've been working with, Free People, and this company has online and offline retail. They've built a base of now more than 1 million fans on G+. And that itself was a feat by connecting with them, sharing with them video and content, pictures. But at 1 million people, they said, you know what, it's time we not only rewarded them for their loyalty and advocacy of our brand, but that we converted them from just fans to becoming part of our revenue stream. And so they said, thanks for being a fan. Here is a G+ exclusive discount opportunity. And that's driving huge revenue for them as they're tapping into this group that they began by having a relationship and now are building that into a meaningful, valuable, and quantifiable partnership.
I think one of the stats that had come up in our earlier conversations was something along the lines that 70% of brand content online is created by customers, not necessarily the brands themselves. So how do you see businesses really embracing that and driving that to their advantage through social?
Well, so this is part of the challenge of the whole thing. I remember in the early days of social, advertisers saying to me, I'm afraid to engage because people might say unkind things about my brand. And I always said, well, they're saying them anyway. It's up to you whether you want to participate in that conversation or not. What we've seen is marketers taking a stadium approach. It's the Super Bowl, we've got tens of thousands of people in one place, let's put up some billboards and advertise to them because we got them here. The way we're trying to look at it differently is to, instead of just use that as another massive forum, why don't we start talking about targeting the right people under the right circumstances?
Right. And then that naturally just comes into a question that we have, but one I'd love you to address, and then how does this fit into the overall marketing mix? I mean, I can't tell you how often I hear from brands that social is just that thing that we're going to do for the time being, but still the money is placed in more traditional, grounded programs where metrics have been long established, whether they're the type of metrics we really want to see. That's another conversation to have. But I mean, in your opinion and in your experience, really, what is that role that social plays in the overall mix?
Yeah, it's I'm reminded of when the internet first got started, right? Pre-bust, right? the original bubble. I was with a client who someone in the room said, "Why do you have a website?" And he said, very proudly, as a matter of fact, he said, "We have a website because people ask if you do, and the wrong answer is no." And I said, well, that's one answer to that, And I'm afraid, to a certain extent, some marketers have gone through a phase of that with social. Well, we have a social program because you should have a social program. The real answer is getting back to attribution. We say about mobile that mobile doesn't have a conversion problem, it has an attribution problem. People are converting on all the time, we're just not capturing it. Very similar thing is happening in social. I think if you pin someone down who is saying, I don't know what I'm getting for my social programs, they would equally have a hard time saying that it's not worth anything. They just don't know how to interpret it. And so what we are advocating is that marketers, and we'll get into this in the playbook, but marketers need to start thinking about what are the values of all these multiple discrete behaviors that are taking place on their social platforms.
Right.
So that's the role that it plays. It's an enabler of a lot of things.
I think about, especially in this next question, the ROI question comes up quite a bit, and I wonder if that is in some sort of psychological response to maybe avoid trying to find that right answer. And the next question is really tied to that, is how do you invest in community to the point where it actually benefits your business, right? And so I want to set that up a little bit more too, is that when we look at community can be measured by how many people were participating in the Hangout, how many people gave you a +1 or a share or a comment, but those are just sort of soft metrics to me that don't necessarily symbolize what the idea of a community is, and certainly not sort of the impact on the business. So how does Google look at the benefit of a community on the business?
Yeah, community is a really cool thing, and talking with some colleagues, one of my colleagues mentioned something that I thought was a really insightful comment. She said, community is great, but what it's really about is being a part of something that accomplishes something that makes being a part of that community mean something, right? Yeah. So if it isn't just we're all in this together, but what have we done? And because of what we've done, we've kind of branded ourselves. The way that real companies and brands tap into that is by starting to stand for something that they have in common with their audience. For instance, we recently put Verizon together with an artist named Daria Musk. Now, Daria Musk is a young lady from Connecticut.
And she's going to be here tomorrow. And
is she?
Well, she's here today, but she's actually going to.
Is she in the back there?
Grace our stage tomorrow.
Hi. Oh yeah. Hi. We have yet to meet, but I talk about you all the time.
That was cool.
Well, Daria built her brand on Google+. And so somewhere along the line, we put Daria and Verizon together, and Verizon wanted to promote their 4G LTE. And so Daria did one of her hangouts on air in conjunction with Verizon, and Verizon gave her a Wi-Fi hub that she now uses out and about when she's doing additional hangouts. Now Daria has become a de facto endorser of this brand without even saying it. It's part of what she does. And she gets to experience the value of what they bring, and so do the people who are consumers of her brand.
Well, with the 3.5 minutes we have left, I want to plow you through 2 more questions because they're really important. And this one is one that I actually live in, and that is, how do we organize around social? So typically we see social get set up in a small team. It ends up being in a silo. We heard from Dana Vetter earlier from Aramark how it eventually evolves into this idea of a hub and spoke. It starts to permeate the organization. But how does Google approach that? How should businesses organize around social?
Yeah, this is I think really critical and gets back to where we started. There's a lot to work out about social, and you need advocates within the organization. We believe you need to identify a champion, and a champion who's pretty senior in the org. And there may be people here who are in charge of social, but need somebody up here to get excited about social. That's what we're talking about. Identifying someone who can put together a coalition across all the different disciplines within the company. Because social isn't just a marketing concern, it isn't just a PR concern, and often enough it ends up in this little pocket. Mm-hmm. But you should have someone who can put together a coalition of executives from around the company in marketing, in product, in PR, in legal,
Right.
All of whom understand and begin to communicate throughout the company that social is an integral part of what you do. It's an integral part of your company's brand identity. And you all need to be following the metrics together, seeking accomplishments together, agreeing to what the goals are, and working toward those ends together.
Well, you sort of set the stage for the last question, and that is, how do we measure social media beyond the basics? And I certainly see a lot of basics out there. I also see a lot of really creative and advanced approaches, but what's your advice to companies?
Yeah, it gets back to understanding that it's more than plus ones and likes and follows. It's got to be about how do we follow that through? How do we attribute a value to this? And you may not be able to close all the loop, but always working to get further and further out there. And that's part of how you're going to get the more senior people excited, is being able to tell that story and say, we understand this much, mm-hmm. and we believe that this is having this effect. I think it's critically important that people stop, it sounds like a funny phrase, but stop stopping, right? Don't stop at we got all these likes, or we got all these comments, or, pursue that next step and come up with some suppositions about what that's worth.
Well, I think that sounds great. With the last 40 seconds, I would love to sort of wrap this up, but it's not just about downloading the playbook. And I don't know if we have a URL that we could throw up on the screen. That would be great if we do. We do. Wonderful. But you're also making a call to attendees here, and as well as just attendees out there on the web who are watching this live? What's that?
Yeah, you can be a part of writing this book. We will be here tomorrow, and come by our little area. We are going to be recording some of you, or all of you, if you'll queue up, asking you these same questions and collecting your thoughts about these things. Because as much as we came up with these questions on the basis of conversations that we've been having, we want to come up with the answers the same way. We have some of our own views, but we'd love to know what you're thinking and how you're innovating and approaching these things.
Well, that's wonderful. Tim, thanks so much for being
Thanks,
on
Brian.
stage. Thanks for bringing Google out here, and excited to work with you on the playbook.